Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Today we got Tim Thomas from the techlunchpail.com to be talking a little about Virginia Tech football. Tim, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Glad to be on here.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. Obviously first year under Brent Pry. What's the fan sentiment looking like? How are the fans feeling about it?
Well, I think it's the honeymoon phase has continued. It's going to go until that ODU kickoff. I think Brent. When you look at the Justin Fuente era, you look at the Brent Pry era, and you look at those two coaches, Brent Pry really fits what Virginia Tech is. Really fit the culture, and that's something Fuente just didn't fit. And I think anytime you have a coach that fits. Look, great coaches will win anywhere. Good coaches at the highest level need to fit. And I think Brent Pry fits. Now, will he win or not? We'll find out. But the odds of it working are better because the fit is better.
And he was a graduate assistant there way back in I think the 1990s too, which I didn't know before I was starting to do some prep to the
Back
show.
back in the mid '90s, and he's gotten to see, when this program was really on the rise before Michael Vick, when this program started to take those steps, including all the way to the Sugar Bowl when they beat Texas, and when Virginia Tech was really announcing themselves under the Frank Beamer era of we're here and we're not going anywhere. And so Pry has seen the early part of that. A lot of his defensive philosophy is from Bud Foster. That's where he learned so much of what he does, and so there's a lot of that fit. And as a source told me, a high-ranking tech source told me when the hire was made, this was made to be a 180 from the Justin Fuente era. And defensive guy who fits the culture, guy, who he played high school football about just under 2 hours north in Lexington, Virginia.
I love it.
This is a guy who just fits the word fit, and he knows and recruiting. He's been at Penn State. Penn State's recruited really well.
Yep.
He's been a part of why they've been able to come into Virginia and really have a lot of success with some of the biggest names. And so Brent Pry, that's going to be a part of the target as well as rebuilding the recruiting in Virginia, trying to retake back the Commonwealth. Obviously, I think it's tougher than it was 10 years ago for Frank Beamer, given how national recruiting has become in general for the biggest programs. But it's the work that Brent Pry they're trying to do. You may not see the full effects in 2023, 2024. The first kind of really full 2-year cycle is the one to watch for that.
So I actually kind of agree. We just got done doing the Virginia season preview, and talk about a coach that I guess I could say this because we got a lot of Virginia Tech listeners on. Talk about a coach that didn't seem to fit. Tony Elliott, I have some question marks about how he fits in there with Virginia. But I kind of do agree with you. I think Coach Pry is a great fit. I want to get to the quarterback position because they're a quarterback battle. I watched the spring game. It seems like Grant Wells kind of has commanded that job. What are you hearing from after spring camp heading into the summer about that quarterback spot?
Yeah, I don't want to overread into one data point.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, 1 of 15. And Jason Brown didn't have as good of a team. You look at how those rosters broke down. Brown faced the tougher defense and didn't have as good of a team. With that said, Wells just looks so much better in that game. I think it's hard not to think Wells is the front runner at this point. But we'll see. There's plenty of time for things to change still. Still a fall camp. Tech wasn't ready to name a starter. I don't think that was some sort of transfer portal tact or anything like that. I think it was just, I think the gap isn't clear yet. And it could be one of those things where we see they go with one, and if one is struggling, they make a change. So it's kind of the position. I mean, Wells looks like the future, regardless. Browns is the final season of college football. Wells is the future. The question is he the now at Virginia Tech? And I think the answer to that, especially with what he could show down the field, regardless, I think this is an improvement over what Tech had with Braxton Burmeister.
Yes.
And I think, unfortunately for Tech fans, plenty will be playing the what if with after losing Hendon Hooker and the mess, the terrible decision. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day.
Yeah, that's me and Dill. That took us so by surprise. Seeing how the success Hendon Hooker had at Tennessee last year.
It didn't take me by surprise. I'll tell you that right now. Seeing what he did, the touch he had, it seemed like he could place. There's not a lot of guys who can place a ball on downfield throws. Hooker was one of those guys. You don't you don't take around a complete quarterback like that and sometimes rotate him in with a guy like Braxton Burmeister, who look great. Both of those guys have great work ethic and all, but Burmeister is a glorified athlete.
Yeah,
Hendon Hooker's a complete quarterback,
yeah.
and it shows. It shows what, and for Tennessee, it's showing with what they got last year, and is why Hendon Hooker's a sleeper to win the Heisman.
I agree. I think he certainly is. Going back to this Virginia Tech team, so I personally think Grant Wells would be the starter from what I've seen. I followed Jason Brown a little bit at South Carolina. Like it was at a certain point where they were starting to GA over Jason Brown. So let's look at this wide receiver position. Hopefully, you can fill me in a little bit about you're losing two of your leading receivers last year in Trey Turner and Tavian Robinson. I believe Trey Turner going to the NFL and Tavian Robinson ends up at Kentucky, I believe.
Yep, and that's a great addition for Kentucky. I
Yes.
think that should be hyped up more than it has been. That was a big time move. The guy's he's a two-way dynamic player. I mean, he's an all
Yes.
American punt returner.
Yeah.
And that's the type of player he's. And then additionally, he's a very talented slot guy.
He's got
So
some juice.
it's yeah. So this is it's one of those things where Robinson would have been a star, and that's I think you're going to see a definition when kind of defining this team and what's going to hold one of the things that holds this team back. Where's the stars?
Yeah.
Where's the star talent? There's a lot of solid, but there's not a lot of star talent. And that's why Tech is in it, looking ahead at the Coastal. We'll probably get to that a little later, but when you look ahead, it's hard to have Tech in the conversation with
Yeah.
Miami and Pitt. It's easy to have Tech as can they get to a bowl game? That's the conversation.
Yeah. Is there any wide receiver? I've heard some good things. Jaden Blue, I believe the transfer from Temple. I've heard some good things about him. Are there any other guys that keep your eye out for in terms of creating some explosive plays from that wide receiver spot?
Yeah, there's a lot of potential. And yeah, Blue's intriguing. Didn't get to see a lot from him in the spring game. But he had that big 2019 at Temple, almost 100 catches. Should be in a good passing, or at least a respectable passing attack for the first time since that season.
Yeah.
So that should help. You have Dawan Lofton, very talented young guy out of Texas, sophomore season now. Showed a lot of promise at the end of last season. Was very hyped up before, but didn't play a lot early in the season until Justin Fuente got thrown out the door. Interestingly enough, but he's a very talented guy. I think there's loads of potential with him. Caleb Smith's been always a steady guy, but he's got a lot of speed. He's faster than I think we all in Blacksburg even realize. And he had the 2 long touchdowns from Grant Wells in the spring game. A lot of potential there. And then you have Jalen Jones, who's probably the 4th guy. If you're looking at that receiving core, who's shown a lot of potential. Like I said, I'm big on both Lofton and Jones. I think they both have bright futures. Are they ready to be stars yet? I don't know. The opportunity's there, though. And that's, like I said, the thing that's going to define is that receiver room is solid, but right now, I mean, the question is, can someone be a Trey Turner, Tavion Robinson, the extended the tight end spot with James Mitchell? Can they get that star talent for next year to really help Grant Wells out? I don't know if some of those guys will be able to make the jump. It's a lot of questions.
Yeah, that does seem to be a lot of questions from the playmakers on the outside. I want to ask you a real quick question about this offensive line. Obviously, losing like the Smith and Luke Tenuta. I don't think I said that right. Luke Tenuta. How's that offensive line depth looking like? What I like to ask a lot of the experts that come on is, how many guys do they feel comfortable about trotting out there? Are they 6, 7 deep? Are they 7, 8 deep? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's very great, and I think Tech needs to find someone in the portal or something just for depth. I think, like I said, there's upside. You lose 3 guys like Brock Hoffman, Luke Tenuta, Lacita Smith. You lose 3 of your 5 starters, and you're in a situation. Parker Clemens is promising; he'll probably be at left tackle. Or he will be the left tackle. Janzi will probably be at right, which will be interesting to see. But that was one of those interesting things where Janzi's been the right tackle, and then Luke Tenuta jumped him. Or actually, Silas Janzi's got an interesting story. He was going to be the starting left tackle back 3 years ago when Tech played Florida State, that big Labor Day night top 25 team, gets hurt. Christian Darrisaw jumps him for it, and the rest is history with Darrisaw, future first round pick. Then he's at right tackle, and there's this promising guy by the name of Luke Tenuta who starts back and forth, and then Tenuta jumps him. And then there's this last year, this promising guy by the name of Parker Clemens, who eventually jumps him on the depth chart. And so it's kind of the weird thing for Janza. He's a solid player, maybe he's more of an interior guy, but with the situation at tackle, Tech doesn't have a lot of much at tackle. I mean, you can see the depth chart right there. Obviously, we're going to see freshmen come in to kind of help, but you can't. How much can you really count on a freshman? It's the weirdest thing is a freshman offensive line is probably the hardest position to come in and make an instant impact.
Yeah,
as a
absolutely.
freshman. It's reversed in the NFL for some reason. I don't know why, but it's the hardest position to go from high school to college. And so the depth is going to be a concern, especially at tackle. There just isn't much.
So
I think
you
Brody
think they
Meadows.
can? Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, you had Brody Meadows, a freshman who was early enrolled, who might end up being forced into that. And you have a guy, Will Jones, who could be, a walk-on in his second year. That's kind of, you have Bob Schick as well, who a JUCO transfer will probably be a top swing tackle per se, a swing lineman. But yeah, I mean, the good news is you have Johnny Jordan, who wasn't a starter last year, but was a starter at Maryland, was kind of the swing guy, ended up in the end because he wasn't actually a guard. He gets to come in at center fully this year, got that extra year. That was huge for Tech. Otherwise, they are going to have to desperately find someone to play center in the portal. Caden Moore is promising. Clemens and Moore are both very promising. Maybe now Joe Rudolph's next NFL guys and Tech's next offensive line NFL guys. Jesse Hanson's an intriguing kid as well, who's bided his time as a backup and now will get the chance. Maybe he's going to be forced into a jump more. Is he ready to be a starter compared to just a swing guy? I don't know. But it's definitely offensive line's definitely, for all the great offensive line Tech has had over the past 2 or 3 seasons, this is kind of a step back, largely because of depth, but also it's just a rebuild. There was so much talent that went out of this program, and there's so much youth coming into it. But it's going to take some time for Joe Rudolph, and he's, if they end up being one of the, upper half ACC offensive lines this year, it'll be just the latest reminder of how good of a coach Joe Rudolph is.
Yeah. Put that down in my notes as something to look for. You think they could maybe target a guy in the portal during the summer, try to get one in there?
Yeah, I think that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
I think I don't know who at this point. I think we're, it's running out
Running
of time.
out of time. Yeah.
And maybe it's one of those things you embrace that's going to be a rebuild, and you throw some guys in the fire.
Get some of the young guys.
Maybe that's just the way it plays out. So we'll see. But
let's take a look at this defense real quick. That is returning is I think like 25th in returning production. They're returning a decent amount of guys. A guy like Dax Holyfield, I feel like's been at Virginia Tech for like 18 years, but he's actually only going into his 5th year. Let's start at the D line. Obviously, losing Amari Barno, who ran the fast 40, but wasn't the most productive guy last year, but he's a very talented guy. What at the defensive line? Who's looking to step up, maybe to create some tackles for a loss, some sacks?
Yeah, well, I think Tywan Garbett, he was a guy I thought was going to break out in 2020.
Okay.
And he had some off the field issues. Nothing, it was more so some family health issues that kind of he actually left the program. He was still part of the program, but he left being in the on-field activities to go be with that return mid-season. And that kind of stunted his development. Kind of need a reset year, which 2021 proved to be, where he was solid. I think he's a guy with so much former 4-star recruit out of my former home area, Fredericksburg area kid. I think he's a guy to watch in terms of defensive end. And then it's interesting, like I said, Cole Nelson, I don't think he's going to start this year, but he's got so much potential. Feldarius Payne, I think the transfer out of Nebraska is going to probably be the other guy. I think there's a reason, that was a position where Tech needed. But Nelson's got so much potential he could. CJ McCray's intriguing as well. You have guys like Jalen Griffin, Eli Adams, who are solid backups. I don't think they're ACC starters, but that's where they kind of work. And Matthias Carroll's another talented kid as well, defensive end with lots of upside like Nelson. And so it's going to be interesting. That room's going to be one to watch in terms of that second defensive end spot. How that, like I said, I think it's Payne, but how that shakes out for that spot and then farther down, it's going to be fascinating to watch how that all plays out. And then, of course, you shift the defensive tackle. Those big three, Kendricks, Pollard, and Fuga, have been together for so long. I think those are guys that can take strides into being that all ACC level players this year. I think there's a lot of talent there. I think defensive tackle is going to be stronger than defensive end this year, which is somewhat of an inversion, slightly maybe from last year's team. But, Pollard's been a really good player. Looked great in the spring game. And then Fuga was praised, actually won, I think, the defensive version of the most improved from the staff. Looks like him and Kendricks will be battling, and those three will be rotating a lot. Wilfried Penney will probably be that fourth, might be that fourth DT, but Gunnar Givens. Watch out for Gunnar Givens. He was supposed to be an offensive tackle. He was a four-star offensive tackle recruit.
True freshman?
What? Gunnar
True
Givens.
freshman?
Yeah. Or what's the
Wow.
question? Yeah. So he was, that's what I thought. But Tech wanted to give him a shot on defensive line first, and actually was surprisingly decent. Now that could change in the fall. More reps to be like, yeah, maybe we need to push you over the offensive line. He's a developmental guy anyway, huge ceiling, great athlete, whichever position he ends up at. But he could be a guy who works into that fourth or fifth defensive tackle because you kind of need five guys.
Yes.
So he's a guy to watch. But defensive tackles can be the stronger part of this line. There's just more experience and more high-level talent at defensive tackle, or proven high-level talent at defensive tackle. But Cole Nelson's definitely a guy. I don't think he starts. I think it's going to be Payne. But obviously Payne hasn't arrived yet. He'll be here in the summer. He's a spring transfer commitment. But Nelson's a guy, loads of potential. Everybody's been high on him for a while. He could be the guy that, breaks down and just takes the whole thing anyway.
Sounds like you're, pretty high on what this front four defensive line could look like, especially at that D tackle spot.
A lot of potential, but we'll see. Like I said, can they break in the star? That's the question throughout this team. Who are the stars going to be? Can they be just solid, maybe all, or can they be guys who could be all ACC first, second, third team guys, not just maybe getting an honorable mention?
Yep. When you're looking to crack, the difference between winning 6 games and making a bowl, and then winning 8 games and being real competitive in the ACC.
Yep.
In terms of the back end, obviously I mentioned Dax Holyfield, very, very experienced guy. And then in the back end, I believe you're losing Jermaine Waller. Other than that, keeping most of these guys, are we feeling pretty strong about this back end of the defense here?
Well, you look at Shamari Connor. I mean, that's a guy, probably more strong safety in the free spot than anything else, kind of shifting from that nickel back to, as Tech kind of goes to more of a 4-3 with Pry, but that Sam linebacker spot with Keontae Jenkins, who I agree with that, is good. I think at this point looks like the guy to beat for that job. It's kind of a more linebacker version of a nickelback from what Tech was running with Justin Hamilton, and kind of how Justin Hamilton evolved Bud Foster's defense, and how Brent Pry's evolution and shift that looks a little more like Bud Foster's, a little closer to what Hamilton's did. Then that's let Connor sliding back. You look at the safety, like I said, Connor's one of those star guys. I think he's one of those all ACC talents. He's one of those best, guys you need to be a star. He can land the big hit, just can't have as many missed tackles if you're Connor, but he's a big time talent. And then you have that other safety spot. Nazir people seem like the slight favor, and seem like Jalen Stroman might be the guy to push him. I think Stroman still is, but Nyquist Hawkins looks really good. He played alongside Connor in the spring game, and he looked really good. And I think he's right there in that battle as well. Former 4-star recruit. Looks like he's showing steps forward finally. Maybe the new staff might be what he needed. And corner, I think, is the stronger part. Like I said, that you have Connor might be the best secondary player for Tech. But I think that other safety spot's could be a weaker spot. Whereas corner, because like I said, Nasir Peoples is a good player. He's not a spectacular player at all. Yeah. Where Stroman and Hawkins may have that upside down the road. Stroman maybe in the short term. You look at corner, Chapman and Strong, very good duo. Strong, I think, he's got, he's such a good athlete. It's still refining his game and got so much speed. It's actually a kid that came out of Maryland kind of under the radar. I think a similar area, actually, Christian Darrisaw and Zion Johnson, who both came out, which, by the way, I didn't even realize Darrisaw and Johnson both came from the same high school until this draft this year. I don't know. Teams need to maybe make some more recruiting
trips on there.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Strong, is probably the higher upside. Chapman's steady. He is a steady corner. You have DJ Harvey, who showed loads of upside, loads of potential in that, that pinstripe bowl that was ugly. Him and Stroman, both showed loads of potential. I was up there in New York that day. That was a bludgeoning to watch, but those two guys did show a lot of potential that day. And I think Harvey's a very intriguing guy. And then, of course, you go farther down the depth chart, you look at a guy like Cam Johnson's an intriguing prospect as well at corner in terms of the future waves and whatnot that may be there. So, I think but it's been interesting to see. It seems like they're looking for a JUCO player at this point still to try to fill out this secondary, maybe a safety, or a corner, more so maybe corner, which I don't know if I agree with that. But, sometimes when you've seen a whole lot less this spring than others.
Yeah.
that leads to some of the differences. So
Yeah.
I think Harvey, like I said, is a guy who could be a guy who breaks out big as well. He's got a load of potential, and
It
Stroman.
seems like you're decently excited about a couple guys on this defense side of the ball. I'd expect it. I mean, I'd expect this defense to go in the right direction under Coach
Yep.
Pry.
I
It
think it's
just
going to be
see,
the strength of this team is going to be the defense this year. Like I said, I think a lot of but the question is, a lot of these guys who can become stars.
yep,
That's the big issue. Who's
yeah,
can be guys who are like that all ACC first or second team caliber guys, and that's the big
yeah,
question with this defense and this team. Well, this team as a whole, I think
yeah,
the defense is more has some of those guys with that potential. But there's a lot of solid starters, a lot of quality ACC starters. There's no doubt about that. It's where's the star talent to take this team to the next level, and that's the thing that has me thinking 5-7 to 7-5 for Tech, and
yeah.
not 8-4,
Eight,
9-3 battling Miami and Pittsburgh for the Coastal.
Yep, yep. I completely understand that. Again, as a Wake Forest fan, trying to find the stars, a team that doesn't recruit that well, trying to find guys who are going to kind of reach that elite level. Let's close and we'll get you out of here. What's you kind of got into it? Reasonable expectations for this first year under Coach Fry. You mentioned 5-7 between 7-5. I'm guessing you want the bowl game. What is kind of reasonable expectations going there?
Yeah, I think it's around that bowl game. I like I say, I
Yep.
don't think this is a Coastal contending team at all.
Yep.
I really don't, and so I think it's around a bowl game. Is what you're looking at. I think that's got to be. I mean, if they're contending for the Coastal, they're winning 9 games this year. Brent Pry maybe should probably be the ACC Coach of the Year.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's where it's at.
Yep.
And like I said, you lose so much. They lost so much experience last year after last year. A
Yeah.
bunch of those guys who left quote unquote early because they if it wasn't for the free COVID year, they would graduate and been gone and out of eligibility anyway.
Yeah.
Luke Tenuto was actually only one of the 10 early, and I use quotations because we're going to see this confusion across the sport for the next few years.
Yep.
Luke Tenuto was the only truly early departure. But still, this is a younger team. This is a rebuilding team. There's, like I said, the defense is going to be the stronger side of it. But there are a lot of guys who you wonder what their ceiling really is. Like I said, I think Garber could be a breakout guy, but Kenny, we'll see.
Yeah.
Or is he, I mean, some of these, Dax Hollifield, Alan Tisdale, they've proven to be steady players, but do they have the big upside? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
And so can they can they take those jumps? That's going to be the question. The weird thing about this schedule as well is you get a middle stretch there where you have at North Carolina, you have Pittsburgh on the road, you have Miami at home, you have a Thursday night game at NC State at the end of it, where they could lose 4 straight. And then you look at the back end where they have Georgia Tech, they have Duke, they have UVA at the end, they have Liberty the week before, Liberty without Malik Willis. Obviously Hugh Freeze has done a tremendous job there. It could be a whiplash of a season.
Yeah.
Once Tech could leaves the first 4 3-1, 2-2, with West Virginia, Boston College in there early on, but of course that West Virginia game rivalry on a Thursday night in Lane, that helps a whole lot. But that's the weird thing is how does Tech handle the potential ups and downs that this season could have, especially if they could have a 3 or 4 with that Miami Pitt NC State stretch, they could have a 3. UNC being a toss-up game, maybe 4. There could be a significant losing streak in there. How do they handle that and bounce back? Is going to be something to watch. But like I said, there's still a lot of youth on this team that needs to be developed and grown and whatnot. And kind of like I said, it's a rebuild. It's a rebuild in Blacksburg. And, you're building for the future with guys. If you look on the offensive side, guys like Wells and Lofton and Jones, and you look at Nick Gallo and Parker Clements and Malachi Thomas, who at running back, who I think is one of the best players on this team, showed tons of potential last season. And on defense, I mean, you look at, once again, a guy like Cole Nelson who could work his way in, and Kendricks and Pollard and Fuga, who all may have another year or less. Well, Pollard could be a guy's big year, and who knows, maybe leaves early to be a day 2 or 3 draft pick. But you look at guys like Strong and Stroman and Harvey and these other guys that develop, Connor being one of the veteran guys, Hollifield being one of the veteran guys, Garpet as well. But that's where, like I said, there's a lot of development to be done, a lot of rebuilding to be done. But who knows? You never know. That's why we play the games.
Right. Play the games. That's right.
But we'll see. That's where I think Tech, like I said, 6-6, 7-5. I think you could be very happy with that.
Yeah, bowl game, and then seeing some of the young guys show some promise moving
Yep.
into the next couple of years. All right, Tim Thomas, thank you for coming on. Again, I want to shout out, if you guys are a fan of Virginia Tech sports, go check out the Tech Lunch Bill. The Virginia Tech Hokies baseball team playing pretty well, right? I think.
Yeah,
versus regional.
they are number 4 national seed.
There you go.
Hope Spring is eternal in Blacksburg. It was a heartbreaking weekend on Tech softball. Number 3 seed crashed out before reaching Oklahoma City, but Hope Springs eternal. Tech baseball, number 4 national seed. I know some Tech fans probably saw that they get the super regionals. They may have to play Florida, who took out Tech in softball.
Good, I like
Funny
it.
enough. So, comedy sometimes how these things work out. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I mean, Whit Babcock has done a tremendous job. If you look across the board, the football is the big issue, though. 90% of everything is as good as it's ever been, you could argue, for Tech,
Most important,
or at least at a really high level. But 75 to 80% of what matters to a lot of people is the one thing where Tech's got work to do.
Yep. Well, hey, they're a young team. Hopefully, they can kind of show some promise. Again, 6-6 bowl game would be nice. Again, check out the Tech Lunch Pail if you guys are into Virginia Tech football. We appreciate you guys listening, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.